Hello and welcome to a new video. Today I'm going to be talking about the interesting symbiosis between YouTubers and YouTube horror for kids. YouTube horror for kids is a branch of horror video game media that has had many names over the years. Some people like to just call it indie horror, but I think that's a misnomenclature because this isn't just indie horror. You don't see Puppet Combo or Scorn or White Day or Agony or any other bigger named indie horror game brought into these discussions. Similarly, I think calling it mascot horror is an error because almost all of horror is mascot horror. Things like Freddy, Jason, Michael Myers, The Thing, the Xenomorph, the Predator. If you go back earlier than that, you have like Frankenstein, the Mummy, the Wolfman. You have the literary counterparts in the 19th century, along with like the War of the Worlds Martians and the Invisible Man. And even before that, you have like the Chupacabra, Baba Yaga, Krampus, Satan. Like, there's mascots abound in the whole history of horror, but we're talking about a specific subset of a specific entertainment media found specifically to appeal to a specific demographic that tends to engage in a very specific website, YouTube. YouTube horror for kids. Horror games that thrive in the YouTube platform with a basic audience primarily consisting and appealing to children. That doesn't mean that only children can enjoy these games, and in fact many of them have quite a few teenager to adult audiences as well, but a lot of them are geared towards this formula of what if childhood thing but scary. What if Chuck E. Cheese animatronics but scary? You have Five Nights at Freddy's, which is what I almost said. What if 90s edutainment games but scary? You have Baldi's Basics. What if The Guy Across the Street but scary? Hello Neighbor. What if Sesame Street but scary? My Friendly Neighborhood. What if like Dora the Explorer but scary? Amanda the Adventurer. What if a Toy Factory but scary? Poppy Playtime. What if Furbies but scary? Tattletale. And the latest in this trend of what if X but scary is what if Kindergarten but scary. As you can see, we're rather scraping the bottom of the barrel. What's next? What if Nap Time but scary? What if Potty Training but scary? It's inevitable if this trend continues, but the game that seems to have broken the camel's back is Garten of Banban. Many YouTubers have gone on to try and advertise this as the next Poppy Playtime, but when everyone else gets a game, and to the game's credit, it is free for the value it brings, they find a simplistic, haphazard, poorly designed, 15-minute romp full of store-bought assets, and the only unique thing being a gaggle of rather poorly drawn, indistinct characters that you see on the screen here. And people have come to realize that with all the hype that this game is getting from Let's Players and influencers, it's not really providing the kind of material that warrants that hype. The majority of the ire is placed on the developers themselves, a two-man band known as the Euphoric Brothers, and while that's not exactly completely unwarranted, they absolutely knew what they were doing when they were making a game of what if childhood thing but scary. I think the blame is more complex than just these two people. For many people like myself, YouTube is just a hobby. I can make a video whenever I want, and if I don't want to make a video, I don't have to. If there's a game that interests me, I'll make a video on it, and if there's a game that interests me but I don't feel I have anything new to say, I won't make a video on it, let alone all the videos I don't make about all the games that don't interest me. But for many people, it's a livelihood, it's a business, it's where they earn money through ad revenue from generating clicks. The more people who click your videos and watch your ads, the more money you make, and this has been able to sustain people's lifestyles pretty decently despite all the fuck games that the powers that be at YouTube have been trying to implement. In fact, one of the reasons those fuck games contribute so much to the production of games like Garten of Banban is because games that have a lot of actual adult stuff, violence, nudity, swearing, the kind of stuff that isn't appropriate for kids, now can lead to a channel being demonetized or just the video itself, meaning these YouTubers aren't able to make very good ad revenue. So games like, say, Scorn and Agony and Puppet Combo's output are much riskier titles to make videos off of, to do labor in making videos on, than something like Poppy Playtime or Garten of Banban. The reason that YouTube has been shooting itself in the foot so much in regards to this stuff is because a lot of kids watch YouTube, and the age-old scare tactic of we need to restrict your ability to express yourself to protect the innocent children still runs through their boomer tier minds. But that's only part of the equation. They aren't entirely wrong in the sense that a lot of children are in fact on YouTube. It's become effectively a babysitter for the modern generation. Children have always kind of liked horror, but they've also always liked stuff geared toward children. And so when Five Nights at Freddy's became a thing, it was a rather quick success because it unwittingly tapped into the combination of those two markets. Similar to, say, how Kung Fu Panda became big in China, because as it turns out, they like pandas, they like Kung Fu. How the hell did they not think of combining those beforehand? Who knows, but someone else managed to strike gold. In fact, YouTube is such a major boon for children and such a thing that draws them in that it's effectively the main competitor for a lot of other industries. For companies like, say, Disney, Warner Brothers and Paramount used to be their big competitors. They want kids to watch Disney Channel and not Cartoon Network or Nickelodeon. But now their big competitors are Markiplier or 8-Bit Ryan or Jacksepticeye or any other one of these bombastic, loud, facetuber, hype-tuber, appeals to little kids kinds of content creators who just flourish when making videos on games like Poppy Playtime and Garten of Banban. So now you have this sort of ecosystem where games that are what-if childhood thing but scary tend to draw the attention of YouTubers and their gaggle of audiences of children, who then go out and buy the game themselves, and you have YouTubers who find that making videos on what-if childhood thing but scary appeals to their audience of children. What you end up having is a sort of cycle where game dev makes what-if childhood thing but scary game, YouTube plays that game and makes a big ruckus about it, children buy the game and that rewards the game dev, and the YouTuber makes money from ad revenue, which rewards him. Thus, it's unsurprising that this has become a winning formula over the last several years, and that doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. When Slender was popular, you got a bunch of Slender clones. When Amnesia was popular, you got a bunch of Amnesia clones. But when Five Nights at Freddy's was popular, Five Nights at Freddy's being a resource management game, you then had Baldi's Basics, which was sort of resource management, but now with the addition of a losing condition constantly following you and knowing exactly where you are. Then you had Hello Neighbor, which was more of a hide-and-seek game where you snuck into someone's house, solved some puzzles, and tried to get into the basement. You had Bendy and the Ink Machine, where you walk around a factory area. It's kind of inspired by BioShock, actually, but more oriented toward kids. You can fight back against the horrors. You have like one or two different weapons. You have Poppy Playtime, which admittingly is very similar to Bendy and the Ink Machine, but you have no way of fighting back against the monsters. My Friendly Neighborhood looks to be basically a child-friendly version of Resident Evil. Unlike a lot of previous trends in horror, this one is copying an idea but not the gameplay itself, leading to a diversity in how these games are played, making it, oddly enough, the best of the horror trends since the inception of YouTube. Now, when these YouTubers have a bunch of games that have high production value and are more complex and have better lore, so the Let's Player and the lore theorist have something to milk, well, I guess everyone wins. But what happens when there's a bit of a drought between these sorts of games? The YouTuber has to make money, so he has to find a new game to incorporate into his content creation so he doesn't run out of content to create. And this allows games like Garten of Banban to flourish because they do fit that mold, just not with any quality. But the YouTuber isn't necessarily concerned with quality, he needs those clicks. And the game dev isn't necessarily concerned with quality because he knows that the game is going to do well based on what kind of niche it fills. If there's a huge drought in this sort of game, and then I come out with Spooky Wookie's Potty Training Nightmare, where you just walk in a straight line and occasionally there's a big old jump scare, I can guarantee you YouTubers are going to flock to that because it fits this sort of niche that has been so successful for them prior. And that's exactly the kind of drought that games like Garten of Banban are taking advantage of. Bendy in the Dark Revival has come out and people played it, made lore videos, time to move on. Hello Neighbor 2 came out, people played it, made lore videos, time to move on. Poppy Playtime Chapter 3, not here yet, and there hasn't been a trailer or any ARG stuff, so what are we gonna do? Oh, here's Garten of Banban. This kind of fits what we're looking for. Let's milk that. As long as we're sticking to kind of biological terms for this strange relationship between YouTuber and game dev, there is a type of YouTuber that I would kind of regard as a sort of parasite in this whole mix. And those are the YouTubers who have basically made a career out of lying to children. People who have videos of, oh, Poppy Playtime Chapter 3, full gameplay, or Garten of Banban Chapter 2, full gameplay, or those shitty like Game Tunes videos that show the origin, the horrific origin of these characters. Like, none of them are being honest about what they're showing. They're passing off something that doesn't exist as existing, but because they're appealing to children, children fall for it, because kids just, quite frankly, have not developed the kind of critical thinking skills needed to understand that's a lie. I mean, for fuck's sake, how many adults don't have critical thinking skills? Those kids never had a chance. So not only are the YouTubers competing against like kids moving on to other YouTubers who might still be milking a newer game, an older game, whatever, they're also competing against the parasites who are absorbing views and attention by pretending that they have something that the YouTuber just quite frankly cannot offer. So, why are so many people upset and saying that, like, quote unquote mascot horror is dead? Well, people were already upset at Poppy Playtime, especially with the very greedy monetization practices that came after Chapter 1 with NFTs and movie deals and just a shit ton of merch for what's effectively a 30-minute tech demo. But Poppy Playtime Chapter 2 came out and basically was double what Poppy Playtime 1 was, significantly better in almost every regard, and so people were at least able to begrudgingly forgive it. But something like this, which doesn't even have the production value of Poppy Playtime's first chapter, and yet links to the merch page on its homepage, has Chapter 2 already in the works as soon as Chapter 1 was done and advertising it front and center, I think made people realize that we're heading in a direction where bottom of the barrel, path of least resistance, most asininingly easy, lazy, soulless, passionless kind of games are going to get big simply because of this formula. They just don't realize that the YouTuber side of it is a major factor into why we're headed in this direction. Nobody really wants Spooky Wookie's potty training nightmare, but as long as trends continue in this direction, that's what we're going to get, whether YouTubers, content creators, parasites, or game devs want it. One good example of discontent towards these games comes from a game developer known as The Meatly. He is one of the heads of development for Bendy and the Ink Machine and The Dark Revival. He made a game that's effectively a parody of Garten Banban. In a single day, he made a cheap game that makes fun of all the kind of tropes you see in YouTube horror for kids. A recognizable mascot monster, fetch quest sort of gameplay, deep hidden lore, all that sort of stuff, and it even ends very similarly to Garten Banban, which that and the timing makes people think it is supposed to be making fun of that game. Now, Bendy and the Dark Revival came out not too long ago, and it has a tumultuous development history. It took many years to develop, especially with the rather grand sort of attempt at making a full game rather than splitting it up into chapters, something that's very much in line with YouTube horror for kids development. Now, imagine finishing working on a game like Bendy and the Dark Revival, which if you haven't seen it, go watch like a video by, say, Super Horror Bro or whatever, and then watch a Let's Play of Garten Banban. And then you see this other game that has taken significantly less time, significantly less budget, and most important to any artist, significantly less effort, and it becomes as big as your own game. I think any artist understands the struggle and ire and just infuriating nature of having put so much work into a project only for something that's objectively less difficult to make becoming as big, if not even bigger, than your own work. From the perspective of certain YouTubers who like to talk about this style of video game but aren't benefiting from it as much as other YouTubers, they don't really get anything out of it, and they can see quite plainly the laziness and lack of optimization or passion that goes into games like this. So now you have game devs who are thinking, why fucking bother? And YouTubers thinking, God, this sucks. The only people who benefit now are YouTubers who are willing to throw away their dignity and hype up a game like this, and opportunist game devs who are willing to exploit this system. It really is no wonder why so many people are upset and directing their hatred toward this game despite the more complex relationship between game developer and YouTuber. But are we doomed to descend further and further into this Dantean hell of mediocrity and shit? Are we in fact going to see Spooky Wookie's potty training nightmare? Maybe not. The thing about trends is they eventually have to end. No kid is going to be super invested in what the kids before him were interested in if there's shiny new stuff to become interested in. And there have been some trends popping up in horror and translating into video game development that don't involve this juvenile shit. For example, the backrooms have begun becoming very popular over the last 2 or 3 years, and have produced quite a few games that these YouTubers have played and gotten some decent attention for playing those games. The Backrooms is not what if childhood thing but scary. In fact, if anything, it's what if adulthood thing but scary. Despite the mixed reception, games like Scorn and Atomic Heart have been doing numbers on YouTube, and doing numbers for the YouTubers who have made Let's Plays and lore videos about them. If YouTubers continue to branch away from specifically what if childhood thing but scary videos, and try to focus on a bit more diverse range of games, ones that maybe kids could still be interested in, but aren't necessarily geared toward children, we'll see a shift in numbers as more and more people tune into these YouTubers, lead to the success of these different games, and then game devs realize, hey, we can get some pretty good, easy success appealing to this audience as long as we try to stand out from the games that already made that kind of game successful. Whether or not that's actually going to happen is pretty up in the air. After all, we are still firmly entrenched in the YouTube horror for kids era, and with games like, say, My Friendly Neighborhood still on the horizon, it's a question of if devs will see numbers from that game and decide to stick with the formula. Perhaps the only thing that will change things is if the next generation of children who are being babysitted by Markiplier see these sorts of games and decide, no, those are games for old people. That's what the teenagers watch and they're lame. I want to watch something different. And so YouTubers will have to find a different sort of game to generate clicks from. Indeed, we are in a rather big slump in terms of games that become big on YouTube. But don't just hate the game, hate the player as well. Anyways, that's all I have to really say on the subject. I saw other people talking about it and decided to throw my hat into the proverbial ring. I hope you enjoyed the video that gave you something to think about and otherwise entertained you. Take care.